Copyright disclaimer: under the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comments, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing.
As I said earlier, I intend to be a partner in securing a better future. We're going to be working, you're going to be working with the United States, and we're going to make sure that the Middle East is going to be a safe and secure place. It's a very important place in the world, means so much. There were so many people who said the Middle East, and this has been going for many, many decades. I've read it many times, that World War III will begin in the Middle East. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There was a time that you would have thought it could have, but it's not going to happen. There won't be World War III, hopefully at all, but it's not going to start in the Middle East. We're not going to have a World War III if we're smart. Never be a World War III. World War III will begin in the Middle East. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There was a time that you would have thought it could have, but it's not going to happen. There won't be World War III, hopefully at all, but it's not going to start in the Middle East. We're not going to have a World War III if we're smart. Never be a World War III. World War III will begin in the Middle East. It's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. There was a time that you would have thought it could have, but it's not going to happen. There won't be World War III, hopefully at all, but it's not going to start in the Middle East. We're not going to...
All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders, the great millstone who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim I heard pushing his gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is Brother Corner Watt from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with edifying lesson through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And Trump is fucking stupid, man. And don't be deceived, by this damn devil saying that there's not going to be any World War III, because the Lord Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, has sent out his prophets, right? The true prophets of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, which are going to be preaching, right? Prophecy, man. Speaking on prophecy. Right, as it says in 2 Ezra the 15th chapter, speak ye in the ears of my people the words of prophecy. See, the true prophets of Yahweh Bashem Shai are going to be doing just that. And again, the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai sent out his men, right, beginning with our elder apostles, right, of Great Millstone on down, right? We've been talking about World War III for years, man. For years, right? As it says right here. And we'll get into a few scriptures, but I want to start right here. This is Jeremiah chapter 28, verse 8. It says, the prophets that have been before me and before thee of old prophesied both against many countries and against great kingdoms, of war and of evil and of pestilence. And see, again, we've been telling y'all that World War III is going to come, right? And that's exactly where, he's getting it from, right? Trump is the one I think ultimately called us, the prophets of doom some years back. So showing you that, they as the scriptures say, right? That their words go into the gates of the nobles, right? These higher ups, these elites, these, lower elites, these higher officials, they know that the prophets are out here, man, and what the prophets are speaking, and the prophets have been out there speaking these things, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashem Shai, speaking them into existence, man, and they're coming to pass, man. They're happening, which is why they have to kind of do some type of damage control. Oh no, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Well, okay, well, and then say it's but the scriptures say otherwise, right? The words of Yahweh Bashem Shai says otherwise. Prophecy says otherwise, and we're going to prove that, man. I have this article right here, right? This is on a Newsbreak app. It says Iran reacts to Trump's speech in Israel. Right, it says the Iranian, and this was 19 hours ago, right? It says the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs lashed out at U.S. President Donald Trump's baseless, irresponsible, and shameful accusations in his speech to the small hat Knesset, right? It says Trump's historic peace deal that he brokered to end the devastating war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas could lay the foundations for a durable peace in the Middle East, but the risk of renewed war between Israel and Iran still looms large over the region. So again, right, Trump had ultimately offered, and this is what he was saying, right, this is what he was mentioning, right, he was talking about, you know, this peace deal, which is why he was stating that there's not going to be any kind of war in the Middle East, that he's going to establish some kind of peace, right? But that's not according to the will of the Lord, right? When you jump to this in what is that, 1 Thessalonians 5:3, it says, for when they shall say peace and safety, which is what he was doing, right? That there's not going to be no World War III, there's not going to be war in the Middle East. What the hell? Right, that there's not going to be any World War III, there's not going to be war in the Middle East. But see, as it says right here, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. So there's no way you're going to be able to get away from World War III, right? Because again, as we're getting into, it's prophesied to take place, man. Right, going back to the article, it says Iran has a huge bearing on the security calculations of Israel, Gulf states, and other neighboring countries, and any tensions with the United States and its main regional ally, Israel, raises concerns about renewed conflict that could disrupt energy markets and threaten global stability, right? It says, in his speech on Monday, Trump had hailed the U.S. in small hat strikes on Iran in June, saying many of Iran's top terrorists have been extinguished from the earth and its nuclear program obliterated. Trump also said Iran is just trying to survive rather than rebuild its nuclear program after such a big hit, and he urged Tehran to renounce terror and make peace with Israel, a major component of lasting peace in the Middle East. But see, again, right there, it was Israel, right, that fired, you know, on Iran and killed, I think it was a Hamas leader, right, that was, you know, ultimately Iranian born, you know, and that ultimately sparked, you know, that conflict between Iran and Israel, right? And then ultimately what happened is America got involved, right? And then there was a firing going back and forth. Really, Iran didn't do much to America, or, you know, because they fired on American bases. Really didn't, you know, they didn't kill anybody or anything like that. But then America ultimately fired back and destroyed their nuclear bunkers, in which Iran was saying that some of those bunkers were already empty, you know. So he's talking about, oh, there was a big hit, it was big this, you know. Really, it was just a show of force, if you will, you know. But Iran is still, you know, flexing back at America and Israel, you know. Just like a few years ago, they were flexing their missile arsenal, you know, heavy, man, you know. But let's continue, right? It says Iran denounced Trump's comments. It says America, as the largest producer of terrorism in the world and a supporter of the terrorist and child-killing Zionist regime, has no moral qualifications to accuse others, right? It says the Iranian ministry said in a statement originally in Farsi, right? So they were speaking, man. They were coming in to cut throats, right? Hey, that's heavy, man. That's heavy. It says the Iranian people, with deep respect for the eternal hero of Iran in the region, martyr General Qasem Soleimani, who played a decisive role in combating terrorism produced by America and ISIS, neither forgive nor forget the American war criminals and their accomplices in that terrorist act. So he's talking about peace, but Iran is saying we're not going to forgive nor forget, you know. And then at the same time, again, tensions with Iran and Israel are still high, you know. And who's to say, right? Because we understand that they, the small hats, right, they've been doing nothing but breaking every kind of, you know, treaty or deal or aid, right, given to the Palestinians, man, right? They've been holding back aid to the Palestinians. And again, a lot of these Muslim nations are pissed off about what's going on, man. They're not just going to stop, right? They've been talking about, you know, ultimately removing all the Palestinians and taking all that land, you know. They're not just going to stop. There's not just going to be some type of peace deal that goes on, you know, and the small hats are going to abide by it? Hell no, man. You know, the scriptures talk about that the thief cometh not but to steal, kill, and destroy. And that's exactly what they've been doing, man. You know, where it says they covet fields and take them by violence. And this is what's happening, man. They're taking that land and it's not even theirs, you know. So you best believe that these small hats, they're not going to stop, right? They're going to continue to push on, man, you know. It says during his first term, Trump had ordered the assassination of Soleimani as the top Iranian general visited Baghdad, Iraq, right? It says the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reiterates that repeating false claims about Iran's peaceful nuclear program cannot justify the United States and the Zionist regime's joint crimes, aggression and confession to terrorism and assassination of Iran's son of Iranian soil, the Iranian ministry said, right? So they're not forgiving that, right? It says Trump, while applauding June's Israeli and U.S. strikes on Iran, also told the Knesset on Monday that neither the United States nor Israel bear the people of Iran any hostility. We merely want to live in peace, which is bullshit, right? It says we don't want any looming threats over our heads, and we don't want to even think in terms of nuclear destruction. It's not going to happen, never will happen, Trump said, referring to Iran developing a new nuclear weapon and ambition Tehran denies holding. You know, which all these nations, right? All these nations are building, you know, nuclear missiles, man. Right? As we read in Joel, the 3rd chapter, it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles. Prepare war. These nations are preparing war right now. So, of course, they're making these nuclear missiles, man. Of course, they're producing these nuclear missiles. I think it was just China, right? One of the government officials of China, you know, that ultimately came out and said that they have a nuclear missile, right, called the 61, right, because it can hold 60 nuclear warheads in one hydrogen bomb, right? They call it the 61. So they're saying that it can reach anywhere in the world in you know, around 20 minutes, and that it's unstoppable, undetectable, right, impenetrable, right? So all these different nations, even America has been testing nuclear missiles, man, right? North Korea has been testing nuclear missiles for years, you know. So again, these nations, we're in the time of war, right? Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, right? There's time, a season, and a reason, and a purpose to everything under the heaven, under the sun, right? Roughly paraphrasing, right? It says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. And see, this is what we've been seeing between all these different nations, man. You know, all the nations are gearing, you know, they've been gearing up for war, or are in some kind of war, right? America and China, right, they're in a trade war against each other, right? You got you know, rumors of war between America and China over Taiwan, right? You got a war happening between, you know, Israel and Gaza. You have a war happening between Ukraine and Russia, man, right? Which America is ultimately, you know, saying that they're going to be sending tomahawks, right, to, you know, Ukraine, right, to help fight against, you know, Russia. You know, he's going to give tomahawks to Zelensky, which is a small hat, by the way, right? Vladimir Zelensky is a small hat, right? Which, that's prophecy in itself, right? As it said, you know, as the scriptures say, right, that you know, the least of the flock shall draw them out, right? The small hats, right? They're the least of the flock. So those that are over there in Israel, right, were Benjamin, not a Jew, right? And then you got Zelensky, right? These are all small hats that have been causing these wars, man. You know, which is the reason why the rest of these nations are starting to prepare for wars, because they've been stirring the pot, right? It says, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears, let the weak say I am strong. And this is what you're seeing, right? A lot of nations are coming up against America, right? Iran. You know, you just read you know, what they were saying about America, in Israel, right? That's some heavy words to be spoken, by Iran against America, man, and the small hats, showing you that the scripture right here is being fulfilled, right? Let the weak say, "I am strong." They don't care, right? They ain't playing. They ain't playing with America or these small hats. They ain't playing with these Edomites at all, right? Verse 11, it says, "Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord." That's right, man. Right, so the mind of these nations are being stirred up, preparing them for war, right? All these nuclear weapons that are being made, they're not for just no reason, they're made for a purpose. In Isaiah 54 and verse 16, it says, "Behold, I've created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire," which are these scientists, these engineers, nuclear engineers, if you will, right? That bringeth forth an instrument for his work, right? "And I have created the waster to destroy." And that's ultimately, what they're meant to do, right? These nuclear missiles are meant to destroy, and mainly, right, when this World War III ultimately reach its peak, these nuclear missiles are going to be shot off, and the main target is going to be America, man. So Trump saying that there's not going to be any kind of war or no World War III or anything like that. Hey, yes, there is, man. Absolutely, there's going to be World War III, right? When we read in Revelations, what is that, 11 and 14, it says what? The second war was past. We're talking about World War II, right? World War II, right? It says the second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly, right? Meaning World War III is coming, and it's coming quickly, man, and we see it, And again, America is going to be the main recipient of all that destruction that's ultimately going to be had, right, when this war ultimately pops off, right? As we read in Amos 9 and 8, it says, "Behold, the eyes of the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai power are upon the sinful kingdom," right? And those eyes are ultimately going into the angels, right, in these chariots, which you've been seeing them at an all-time high, right? Esau's been, really focusing on this, three-eye atlas or 3-1 atlas, which now they're saying is accompanied by other, chariots, man, right? That there's multiple of them, man. It's not just 3-eye atlas, man. There's multiple of them, man. And Esau's scared as shit, which, hopefully, Lord will, I can go into another article, right, just giving a little bit more detail on that. But, hey, Esau seeing the chariots, man, so we know this is why he's speeding things up, man, but it says what? It says, "Behold, the eyes of the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem Shai upon the sinful kingdom," and that's America, right? America is the land of sin, man, right? Because you can sit here and be born as a male and sit here and claim that you're some type of female and get female, sympathy and this, that, and the third, and act however you want to act, You can sit here and say that you're a damn dog. There was a Japanese man that ultimately paid a shit ton of fucking money, right, to make himself into a damn border collie. You know what I mean? Like, that's the type of shit that, America, ultimately condones, and that America has ultimately pushed out to the world, right? As it says in Jeremiah 51 and verse 7, right? That America, has been in that golden cup and have making the earth drunken, making these nations drunken, right? They drunk of that philosophy, that lifestyle that America ultimately, upholds within itself, right? Push that out to the world, and these nations have drunk of that, and that's why you see that type of shit everywhere, man, right? But America is the epicenter of that wickedness, epicenter of sin, right? They condone. I think I'd seen something of 48, right, of the 50 states, right, they allow for cannibalism. Like, that shit's bugged the fuck out, right? You can sit here and they got something called celebrity meats. They take the what is that, the fucking cheek cells of a celebrity, and then they they ultimately grow it in the lab, and you can buy the steak. That's cannibalism, man. They promote, as the scriptures say, folly is set in great dignity, right? They promote doing dumb shit like the crate challenge. People running out crate, breaking their fucking back, ending in the hospital. People, damn near dying and shit. They promote stupid shit. They promote, wickedness, America is the epicenter of sin, right? It says, "And I will destroy it from off the face of the earth, how is he going to destroy it? Right? We read that, in Jeremiah 50 in verse 9, one of my favorite scriptures to go to when talking about America being destroyed. Right? It says right here, Jeremiah 50 in verse 9, it says, "For lo," right, "I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations," right, "from the north country." The north country being Russia, right? Russia being the main one to ultimately shoot off those missiles, right? Or to, come up against America, right? But it says an assembly of great nations. You read in Revelations, the 17th chapter, the 16th chapter, 17th verse, if I'm not mistaken, that there's going to be even America's allies are going to turn against them, So it's going to be a conglomeration of America's allies and America's enemies, right? And those who are kind of played neutral. All these nations are going to turn against America, man, because of the wickedness and evil that they push. People are starting to see it. More and more of these nations are starting to see it. And this is why you got Iran talking crazy about America and the small hats, man. But it says what? It says, and they shall set themselves in array against her, which, Babylon is America, right? They're going to set themselves against America. It says, "From thence she shall be taken, their arrows shall be as of a mighty expert man, none shall return in vain." So all these nuclear missiles are going to be shot off, by all these different nations, man. At one point, what was it? World War II was, about, or at least what they portray, right, was ultimately about coming up against, Germany, for the wickedness that it was doing, for Hitler and the wickedness that he was doing, right? And ultimately what happened, right? They were ultimately dismantled, if you will, right? Hitler and that whole, Nazi, regime or whatnot, right, was ultimately dismantled. And see, we're ultimately coming into a time where the Lord Yahweh Shemel Shai isn't just going to dismantle the American regime. It's going to destroy the American regime, and he's going to use the rest of these nations to do so, right? And if that's not World War III, I don't know what is, man. And again, like I said, Yahweh Shemel Shai has raised up prophets, right, to speak about these different things, man, right? For decades, beginning with our elder apostles on down, right? We've been telling y'all for years, man, that these things were ultimately going to come, and now we're seeing them ultimately start to, really build into that, right? With that skirmish between Israel and Iran, right? Skirmish between America and Iran. What's going on between Ukraine and Russia, right? Talks and rumors of war, which is prophesied, Matthew's 24th chapter, the words of Yahweh Shai, that they would ultimately happen, right, between America and China, right? It doesn't necessarily say America and China, but it says wars and rumors of wars, right, which are taking place, So we're in these times, man, in America, again, right? Trump, don't matter what the fuck Trump says, man. It matters what Yahweh Shemel Shai says, and World War III is going to happen, And again, America is going to be on the receiving end of that destruction that comes, man. So I'm gonna read this precept again, man, and we'll close out. This is Revelations 11 and 14. It says, "The second woe was past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." So with that, Lord wills, edifying, Lord, straight to the point, I want to give all praise, honor, glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak, Wadash, double honor to the elder apostles, elder bishops of the great millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.